The comma, from the Greek I1/4 I plus or minus comma, is a punctuation mark, and it appears in several variants in various languages. It has the same shape as an apostrophe or single closing quotation mark in many typefaces, but it differs from them in being placed on the baseline of the text. Some typefaces render it as a small line, slightly curved or straight but inclined from the vertical, or with the appearance of a small, filled-in number 9. The comma is used in many contexts and languages, mainly for separating parts of a sentence such as clauses, and items in lists, particularly when there are 3 or more items listed. According to the Oxford English Dictionary, the word comma comes directly from the Greek komma, which means something cut off or a short clause. A comma can also be used as a diacritic when combined with other characters. Comma variants. The basic comma is defined in Unicode as U+002C, but many variants by typography or language are also defined. History. In the 3rd century BC, Aristophanes of Byzantium invented a system of single dots that separated verses, and indicated the amount of breath needed to complete each fragment of text, when reading aloud. The different lengths were signified by a dot at the bottom, middle, or top of the line. For a short passage, a media distinctio dot was placed mid-level. This is the origin of the concept of a comma, although the name came to be used for the mark itself instead of the clause it separated. The mark used today is descended from a diagonal slash, or virgula suspensiva, used from the 13th to 17th centuries to represent a pause. The modern comma was first used by Aldus Manutius. Uses in English. In general, the comma showed that the words immediately before the comma were less closely or exclusively linked grammatically to those immediately after the comma than they might be otherwise. The comma may perform a number of functions in English writing. It is used in generally similar ways in other languages, particularly European ones, although the rules on comma usage are Euro, and their rigidity are Euro vary from language to language. In lists, commas are placed between items in lists, as in "they own a cat, a dog, 2 rabbits, and 6 mice." Some English-style guides recommend that a comma be used before the final conjunction in a list of more than 2 elements. A comma used in such a position is variously called a serial comma, an Oxford comma, or a Harvard comma. Such use of a comma sometimes prevents ambiguity. The sentence "I spoke to the boys, Sam and Tom," could mean either "I spoke to the boys and Sam and Tom" or "I spoke to the boys, who are Sam and Tom." "I spoke to the boys, Sam, and Tom." A Euro must be "the boys and Sam and Tom." The serial comma can cause confusion. Consider the following sentence: "I thank my mother, Anne Smith, and Thomas." This could mean either "my mother and Anne Smith and Thomas" or "my mother, who is Anne Smith, and Thomas." "I thank my mother, Anne Smith and Thomas." The writer is thanking 3 people: the writer's mother, Anne Smith, and Thomas. As a rule of thumb, the Guardian-style guide suggests that straightforward lists do not need a comma before the final "and," but sometimes it can help the reader. The Chicago Manual of Style, and other academic writing guides, require the serial comma. All lists must have a comma before the and prefacing the last item in a series. If the individual items of a list are long, complex, affixed with description, or themselves contain commas, semicolons may be preferred as separators, and the list may be introduced with a colon. Separation of clauses. Commas are often used to separate clauses. In English, a comma is used to separate a dependent clause from the independent clause if the dependent clause comes first. "After I fed the cat, I brushed my clothes." A relative clause takes commas if it is non-restrictive, as in "I cut down all the trees, which were over 6 feet tall." Some style guides prescribe that 2 independent clauses joined by a coordinating conjunction must be separated by a comma placed before the conjunction. In the following sentences, where the second clause is independent, the comma is considered by those guides to be necessary. "Mary walked to the party, but she was unable to walk home." "Designer clothes are silly, and I can't afford them anyway." "Don't push that button, or 12 tons of high explosives will go off right under our feet." In the following sentences, where the second half of the sentence is not an independent clause, those guides prescribe that the comma be omitted. Mary walked to the party but was unable to walk home. I think designer clothes are silly and can't afford them anyway. Don't push that button, that'll set off the 12 tons of high explosives sitting right under our feet. However, the comma may be omitted if the second independent clause is very short, typically when the second independent clause is an imperative. In the following sentence, it is sometimes considered acceptable to omit the comma, even though the second clause is independent. Sit down and shut up. Long coordinating clauses are usually separated by commas. She had very little to live on, but she would never have dreamed of taking what was not hers. In some languages, such as German and Polish, stricter rules apply on comma usage between clauses, with dependent clauses always being set off with commas, and commas being generally prescribed before certain coordinating conjunctions. The joining of two independent sentences with a comma and no conjunction is known as a comma splice and is often considered an error in English. In most cases a semicolon should be used instead. A comma splice should not be confused, though, with a syndeton, a literary device used for a specific effect in which coordinating conjunctions are purposely omitted. Certain adverbs, commas are always used to set off certain adverbs at the beginning of a sentence, including however, in fact, therefore, nevertheless, moreover, furthermore, and still. Therefore, a comma would be appropriate in this sentence. Nevertheless, I will not use one. If these adverbs appear in the middle of a sentence, they are followed and preceded by a comma. As in the second of the two below examples, if the two sentences are separated by a semicolon and the second sentence starts with an adverb, then it is preceded by a semicolon and followed by a comma. In the sentence, furthermore, commas would also be called for. This sentence is similar. However, a semicolon is necessary as well. Using commas to offset certain adverbs is optional, including then, so, yet, instead, and to. So, that's it for this rule, or, so that's it for this rule. A comma would be appropriate in this sentence too, or, a comma would be appropriate in this sentence too. Parenthetical phrases, commas are often used to enclose parenthetical words and phrases within a sentence. Such phrases are both preceded and followed by a comma, unless that would result in a doubling of punctuation marks, or the parenthetical is at the start or end of the sentence. The following are examples of types of parenthetical phrases. Introductory phrase, once upon a time, my father ate a muffin. Interjection, my father ate the muffin, gosh darn it. Aside, my father, if you don't mind me telling you this, ate the muffin. Appositive, my father, a jaded and bitter man, ate the muffin. Absolute phrase, my father, his eyes flashing with rage, ate the muffin. Free modifier, my father, chewing with unbridled fury, ate the muffin. Resumptive modifier, my father ate the muffin, a muffin which no man had yet chewed. Summative modifier, my father ate the muffin, a feat which no man had attempted. Between adjectives, a comma is used to separate coordinate adjectives. That is, adjectives that directly and equally modify the following noun. Adjectives are considered coordinate if the meaning would be the same if their order were reversed or if and were placed between them. For example, the dull, incessant droning but the cute little cottage. The devious lazy red frog suggests there are lazy red frogs, while the devious, lazy red frog does not carry this connotation. Before quotations, by some writers, a comma is used to set off quoted material that is the grammatical object of an active verb of speaking or writing, as in Mr. Kirshner says, you should know how to use a comma. Quotations that follow and support an assertion should be set off by a colon rather than a comma. Other writers do not put a comma before quotations unless one would occur anyway. Thus they would write Mr. Kirshner says you should know how to use a comma. In dates, month day, year, when a date is written as a month followed by a day followed by a year, a comma separates the day from the year, December 19, 1941. This style is common in American English. The comma is used to avoid confusing consecutive numbers, December 19, 1941. Most style manuals, including the Chicago Manual of Style and the AP Stylebook, also recommend that the year be treated as a parenthetical, requiring a second comma after it. February 14, 1987, was the target date. However, one exception to this general rule is that a comma is not inserted after the year if the date is serving as an adjective almost as a title. The September 11, 2001 attacks on the WTC brought a renewed feeling of patriotism. If just month and year are given, no commas are used. Her daughter April may return in June 2009 for the reunion. Day, month, year. When the day precedes the month name separates the numeric day and year, so commas are not necessary to separate them. The raid on Alexandria was carried out on 19 December 1941. In geographical names, commas are used to separate parts of geographical references, such as city and state or city and country. Additionally, most style manuals, including the Chicago Manual of Style and the AP Stylebook, recommend that the second element be treated as a parenthetical, requiring a second comma after. The plane landed in Kampala, Uganda, that evening. The United States Postal Service and Royal Mail recommend writing addresses without any punctuation. In numbers. In representing large numbers, English texts usually use commas to separate each group of 3 digits. This is almost always done for numbers of 6 or more digits, and often for 5 or 4 digits. However, in much of Europe, Southern Africa and Latin America, periods or spaces are used instead. The comma is used as a decimal separator, equivalent to the use in English of the decimal point. In India, the groups are 2 digits, except for the rightmost group. However, the comma may not be used for this purpose at all in some styles, for example the SI writing style. A space may be used to separate groups of 3 digits instead. In names, commas are used when writing names that are presented surname first, generally in instances of alphabetization by surname, Smith, John. They are also used before many titles that follow a name, John Smith, Ph.D. Similarly in lists that are presented with an inversion. Socks, green, 3 pairs. Socks, red, 2 pairs. Tie, regimental, 1. Ellipsis. Commas may be used to indicate that a word has been omitted, as in the cat was white. The dog, brown. Vocative, commas are placed before, after, or around a noun or pronoun used independently in speaking to some person, place or thing. I hope, John, that you will read this. Between the subject and predicate, in his 1785 essay on punctuation, Joseph Robertson advocated a comma between the subject and predicate of long sentences for clarity. However, this usage is regarded as an error in modern times. The good taste of the present age has not allowed us to neglect the cultivation of the English language. Whoever is capable of forgetting a benefit is an enemy to society. Differences between American and British usage. The comma and the quotation mark pairing can be used in several ways. In American English, the comma is commonly included inside a quotation, regardless of whether the comma is part of the original quotation. For example, my mother gave me the nickname Bobby Bobby Bob Bob Boy, which really made me angry. However, in British English, punctuation is placed within quotation marks only if it is part of what is being quoted or referred to. Thus, my mother gave me the nickname Bobby Bobby Bob Bob Boy, which really made me angry. The use of the serial comma, also known as the Oxford comma, Harvard comma, or the series comma, is sometimes perceived as overly careful or an Americanism, but usage occurs within both American and British English. Opinions among writers and editors differ on whether to use the serial comma. In American English, a majority of style guides mandate use of the serial comma, including the Chicago Manual of Style, Strunk and White's The Elements of Style, and the U.S. Government Printing Office Style Manual. The AP Stylebook for journalistic writing advises against it. It is used less often in British English, but some British style guides require it, including the Oxford University Press Style Manual and Fowler's Modern English Usage. Some writers of British English use it only where necessary to avoid ambiguity. Barbara Child claims that in American English there is a trend toward a decreased use of the comma. This is reinforced by an article by Robert J. Samuelson in Newsweek. Lynn Truss says that this is equally true in the UK, where it has been a slow, steady trend for at least a century. Nowadays, a passage peppered with comma seguro, which in the past would have indicated painstaking and authoritative editorial attention, smacks simply of no backbone. People who put in all the commas betray themselves as moral weaklings with empty lives and out-of-date reference books. In his 1963 book of Spies and Stratagems, Stanley P. Lovell recalls that, during the Second World War, the British carried the comma over into abbreviations. Specifically, Special Operations, Executive was written SOE. Nowadays, even the full stops are frequently discarded. In other languages, punctuation has been added to many languages which originally developed without it, including a number of different comma forms. European languages like German, French, Italian, Spanish, and Portuguese use the same comma as English with similar spacing. Japanese punctuation normally requires the A in native text. However, in documents that mix Japanese and the Latin alphabet, a full-width comma I1/4 A is employed. Chinese punctuation includes the enumeration comma, or dan comma euro, which is used to separate items in lists. In other cases the standard comma I1/4 A is used. This comma is used to join together clauses that deal with a certain topic or line of thinking. As such, what would appear to an English speaker to be a comma splice is very commonly seen in Chinese writing. An entire paragraph, regardless of length, can consist of clauses joined by commas, with the sole period coming only at the end. Unlike in English, a comma is allowed between a subject and its predicate. The comma in the Arabic script is inverted, upside down, in order to distinguish it from the Arabic diacritic lamma that is similarly comma-shaped. In Arabic texts, Western-styled comma is used as a decimal point. Hebrew script is also written from right to left. However, Hebrew punctuation includes only a regular comma. Korean punctuation usage sees both commas and interpuncts being used for lists. Dravidian languages such as Tamil, Telugu, Kannada, and Malayalam also used a punctuation mark and similar usage to that of European languages with similar spacing. Computing, in the Common Character Encoding Systems Unicode and ASCII, character 44 corresponds to the comma symbol. The HTML numeric character reference is in number 44. In many computer languages commas are used to separate arguments to a function, to separate elements in a list, and to perform data designation on multiple variables at once. In the C programming language, the comma symbol is an operator which evaluates its first argument and then returns the value of its evaluated second argument. This is useful in for statements and macros. In Smalltalk, the comma operator is used to concatenate collections, including strings. The comma-separated values format is very commonly used in exchanging text data between database and spreadsheet formats. Diacritical usage. The comma is used as a diacritic mark in Romanian under the S, and under the T. A cedilla is occasionally used instead of it, but this is technically incorrect. The symbol D was used as part of the Romanian transitional alphabet to indicate the sounds denoted by the Latin letter Z or letters DZ, were derived from a Cyrillic N. The comma and the cedilla are both derivative of a small cursive Z placed below the letter. From this standpoint alone, E unregistered trademark, E, and D could potentially be regarded as stand-ins for SZ, TZ, and DZ respectively. In Latvian, the comma is used on the letters a pound, a 1/4, angstrom, and historically also angstrom, to indicate palatalization. Because the lowercase letter g has a descender, the comma is rotated 180 a degree and placed over the letter. Although their Adobe glyph names are commas, their names in the Unicode standard are G, K, L, N, and are with a cedilla. They were introduced to the Unicode standard before 1992, and their name cannot be altered. For input are sent use all 290 and all 291 sequences. For a paragraph use alt 310 and alt 311, for a use alt 315 and alt 316, For angstrom use alt 325 and alt 326. In the Czech and Slovak languages, the diacritic in the characters a, angstrom yen, and a 3/4 resembles a superscript comma, but it is used instead of a caron because the letter has an ascender. Other ascender letters with carons, such as letters I and C copyright, did not modify their carons to superscript commas. See also, cedilla, igonek, semicolon, serial comma, decimal mark, references. This article is based on material taken from the free online Dictionary of Computing prior to November 1, 2008 and incorporated under the relicensing terms of the GFDL, version 1.3 or later. External links, commas, they're not just for English majors, anymore. English comma rules and exercises, major comma uses, notes on commas, comma guidelines are also helpful for non-native speakers, grammar, punctuation, and capitalization a comprehensive online guide by NASA, the Oxford comma, a solution a satirical suggestion to settle the problem of the Oxford comma once and for all. The quarter and the quotient another satirical compromise between the American and British traditions relating to quotes and commas. The 10 functions of commas in English.